Has anybody seen the GIF of Undertaker as Fraser Crane? And it's him at the piano, but just like with the Undertaker's like Brock Lesnar laugh face. The temptation was real to show him, but I didn't. But I chose I was like, okay, the cucumber thing. Like, what's that all about? And he just said, I had an incident once with a cucumber as a child, and I thought, I don't even want to know. That's enough. Anyway, so cucumbers aside, so like, cause you and Undertaker have something in common, that you both wrestled in WCW, both of you were underutilized, and then eventually went on to WWF and became big stars. But he's in WWF, he's wrestling these atrocious people, like King Kong Bundy, who just looks like a giant fat egg in a singlet. Giant Gonzalez, who was 7 foot tall but had no physique, so they had to give him a furry...
7'7", 7 feet 7 inches tall. Yeah.
And then, but then in 1996, you come into the WWF, and you debut the day after WrestleMania. But the day before you go to WWF and start your program with The Undertaker, you go to Disneyland. Talk about that 24-hour period of going to Disneyland and
I can do that. Yeah, when I joined WWE, and forgive me if I touch briefly on some things I may have covered before in 20 Years of Hell, but I think some of it's important to know is that I was not supposed to be a star in WWE. You know, I had it on good faith that Mr. McMahon wasn't a fan of mine at all. And I think the direct quote was, Cactus Jack will never step foot inside a WWE ring. So as Mick Foley, I stepped inside as Mankind, right? And even then, it was just a concession to Jim Ross. Bruce Pritchard told me this about 4 years ago. JR would bring up my name at every booking meeting as potential talent. And finally, Mr. McMahon, in the fall of 1995, slammed his hand down on the table and said, all right, I'll bring him in, but I'm covering up his face. And it wasn't until yesterday that I saw someone wearing a 1996 Royal Rumble shirt that I remembered the only reason I was allowed to come in. So I take it he was going to bring me in, but was waiting for a look in a way that he could cover my face with style. The Undertaker, in one of many instances showing enormous fortitude, when he fractured his orbital bone working with Mabel, instead of taking time off like a normal human being would do, he worked with a broken, fractured orbital bone. They didn't want to put him under the hockey mask, you know, because they wanted something fancier for him. So they had the creative team come up with some prototypes for some masks, and they ended up going with almost like a Phantom of the Opera type of mask. One of the prototypes they did not use that Mr. McMahon liked was the mask that ended up becoming the Mankind mask. So not only would I not have gotten my break in WWE had it not been for The Undertaker, had I not been paired with The Undertaker for that initial run, I might be any number of places, but there's no way I'm here, right here in Glasgow, Scotland, like 23 years after the fact. And I have to believe, I was a huge fan. When I saw this character debut in 1990, like, I knew on one level, yeah, this is the same guy that I used to travel with, that I used to room with, whose parents' house I stayed at in Houston. But in another sense, it was like, this is something altogether new. Like, it was, to me, he's the greatest character-driven performer that the wrestling business has ever seen. And I only use this phrase in the most positive sense when I say I'm marked out, you know, like, the suspension of disbelief is all important in professional wrestling, and he made it so easy to do that. Like, I'd come running for the TV when The Undertaker was on, to the point I mentioned this to Kenny, I went a 6-year stretch with only seeing him once. And that one time, showing you how into the character they were, The Undertaker and Paul Bearer actually traveled in a hearse for 2 years, like a souped-up hearse. And I'm on the road doing independent shows, and I see this one and only hearse going through a drive-through at like McDonald's. Can you imagine being the person working the window and a hearse shows up with The Undertaker in it? And I literally got out of my car and started chasing it like I was a 12-year-old girl at a Justin Bieber show. Like, it's me, do you remember me, you know? And I got the call. Went in to visit with Mr. McMahon. He laid out this idea for a character. I wondered why they would choose to cover up my facial features, because I thought it meant a selling point. He managed to lie his way into making me believe that something was, possible. And I really applied my, can I tell you about what he said to me? Luckily, somebody in creative told me the name they had figured out for me was the Mutilator, right? The Mutilator, to the point where going to Disney, when I showed up at WrestleMania '96, I had an information packet. All it said was Mutilator on it. So Mr. McMahon sees me. Now it's about the third time that we've met, and he goes, "Do you know your name?" And I lied. I said no. And he goes, "In this business, we've had crushers, we've had destroyers, we've had executioners, but we've never had a mutilator." And that's what you are. And then he gave me the first name of Mason. Mason the Mutilator is instant death in this business, okay? I guess in defense of Mr. McMahon, it was actually the Mason the Mutilator experience. But he goes, "What do you think?" And this is where it pays to be tactical. I went, "I like it. I like it a lot. But what if instead of Mason the Mutilator, it was Mankind the Mutilator?" And Mr. McMahon had a yellow notepad, and he took notes. "Yeah, I'm not sure I understand." I said, "That way we can have a double meaning. We talk about the future of mankind, the destruction of mankind." And I was throwing all these ideas at him, because by the time I got to WWE, I had 11 and a half years of traveling the country and the world. And I had enough confidence to where I could, stand up to this larger-than-life billionaire and feel like I had something to offer. But until I showed up, until I had my debut, I was given that packet that said Mutilator. I didn't know what they were going to do. I debuted that day after WrestleMania. I hear Howard Finkel's voice say, "Coming down the hill, Mankind." No Mutilator. Then the match ends with Bob Holly. In comes the gentle piano music, because I had told Mr. McMahon that I wanted to be the first person to have a separate set of exec music. And he said, "Okay, why?" I said, "Because I envision this character as only feeling complete after he's caused human suffering." And he wrote that down. He took every one of my suggestions. He took, but I didn't know going in if he was going to take any of them. But the Disneyland thing is, I got the packet, right? And now they have WrestleMania week. It runs for 6-7 days. Back then it was probably 3 or 4 days. And I look at my sheet and there's nothing on it. There's absolutely no activities whatsoever. And meanwhile, I've just turned my room into bunk beds, so I've got plenty of room for activities. Any Step Brothers fans out there? And I'm just looking out the window at the Hilton in Anaheim. I'm just looking at Disneyland for 4 days. And finally, it's the morning of WrestleMania. I was like, there's worse things a guy could do on the road than go to Disneyland without his children. So I did. I went, and honestly, the only people who knew who I was would be those hardcore WCW fans who would remember Cactus Jack. I showed up the next day, picked up a Leon White, Vader. To me, it's still the biggest blemish on the WWE Hall of Fame is that Leon White's not inducted in it. I don't know how that happens, but the WWE will pick up the room at WrestleMania, at SummerSlam. When you do media appearances, they pick up the room. But you're responsible for your own incidentals. So in 5 days in a Hilton hotel room, I had racked up less than $50 in expenses, right? A couple of room service meals, I've got protein bars and things like that. Leon says, "Can you just hold my stuff for me?" And I look at Leon's receipt. It's $2,600 in that same 5-day period. And I know that we are short-lived rooming, road mates, because he liked to live at a certain standard that I did not, And we got there. Jerry Brisco pulls me aside, and he said, "What can you do to the Undertaker?" And I said, "I can drop an elbow off a TV truck." And Brisco goes, "We know you like to do some strange things. There may come a time when we ask you to do one of those strange things, but until that time, we ask you not to do any of those strange things. And so I ran in when he was wrestling JBL, who was under Justin Hawk Bradshaw at the time. I ran in, I interfered, man, my heart was pounding. You know, I've got this mask that made breathing really difficult. I had wrestled Bob Holly, and I hated it. You know, I went on a payphone. Nobody had cell phones at that time, and I, like, whining and crying to my wife, like, I hate this mask, I don't want to do it. Maybe if I can just do it for 3 or 4 weeks, they'll let me be Cactus Jack again. But this is like, I have to go back to 91 when I jumped out of a gift box and attacked Sting. Like, these are the 2 biggest moments in my career. Attacking Sting, attacking Undertaker, and man, you know, you go all in. You know, it's like Mr. Miyagi said: you stay on one side of the road, you're fine. You stay on the other, you're fine. Get in the middle, you get squashed like a grape. So you either commit completely 100% to that character, or you don't do it at all. And I committed, you know, and Undertaker committed not just to his character but to mine, and we made an impact that night. To the point where Diamond Dallas Page called up Eric Bischoff and said, bro, that's going to draw.